Let us pray. Our Father, we thank you for your abundant blessings to our province and to ourselves. We ask you to ensure to us your guidance and the will to follow it. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills. Tabling returns and reports.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to table copies of the annual report for the Department of Tourism and Small Business for the year 1984-85.
Hear, hear.
Introduction of special guests.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce to you and through you a group of 18 grade 7 and 8 students from Blueberry Creek School in the Spirit River School Division and in the constituency of Dunvegas, along with teachers D. Meredith Pawn, parents Ken Charlton and Pat Gutrowski. I would like them all to stand and ask we all give them the traditional welcome of the Legislative Assembly.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's my privilege to introduce to you visitors in your gallery, to introduce to you and through you to the members of the Assembly, the members of the Alberta Alcohol and Drug Abuse Commission, most often referred to as ADAC. Today is the first Commission meeting since I've been appointed as Chairman, and as well, the Commission members have had the opportunity to meet the Minister of Community and Occupational Health. They are seated in your gallery, Mr. Speaker, and I would ask each Commissioner to stand when I call his or her name, and I would ask the Assembly to hold their welcome until they are all standing. These men and women are volunteers from across Alberta. Mr. Walt Bodie, Mrs. Aris Coventry, Dr. Tom Melling, Mrs. Lynn Pitt, Mr. Dick Ramsey, Mrs. Lee Reiki, Mr. Leonard Tom, Vice Chairman Doug White, and accompanying the Commission members, Mr. Speaker, and members, our Executive Director of ADAC, Mr. Jan Skirrell, and Executive Assistant to the Chairman, Mrs. Betty Morris. Would the members please signify their welcome?
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce to you and through you three very special visitors to this legislature today. My son Colin and my daughters Michelle and Andrea are sitting in the public gallery. You all know that often as MLAs that our family can take the back seat in the attention department, especially during the provincial election and during the sitting of the House. Colin, Michelle, Andrea, you're still number one in my life, and I would urge all members of this Assembly to give them a very warm welcome.
Mr. Speaker, it's indeed my pleasure to introduce to you and the members of this Assembly 21 young adults who are grade 6 students in Our Lady of Mount Pleasant School in the Camrose constituency. They are accompanied by their teacher, teachers, Mr. Joe Tucksher and Mrs. Kathy Brown, and with drivers Mr. Ed Lauer and Mrs. Bernie Gumpiker. I would ask that they stand and be recognized and receive the welcome of this assembly.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask a question of the minister responsible for the Securities Commission, and I assume that that would be the Consumer and Corporate Affairs Minister. I wonder if the minister has arranged any meeting with the Alberta Securities Commission to discuss their policy with respect to filing requirements for annual financial statements, to determine whether there's any time limit to the number of extensions a company may be granted before they must file.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite is quite right in her assumption regarding the Securities Commission, and the answer is no.
Not very healthy. I wonder then, with regard to Northwest Trust, has the government any explanation it can offer on a cease trade order of Northwest Trust shares?
Mr. Speaker, as members opposite may know, but it appears as if they don't, the Securities Commission is a quasi-judicial, independent tribunal, and that means that it operates without direction and control of the government. It operates according to its mandate as set out in the statute. With reference to the particular matter that the member opposite has raised, that has been decided by the Securities Commission. It was decided yesterday. There was a decision from the bench that the extension be given.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker, perhaps to the Treasurer this time. I wonder if the Treasurer would outline any other options available to him to ensure the protection for the public investment, which he referred to just a few days ago in this Assembly, than either withdrawing the $85 million in Treasury branch funds and thus jeopardizing the future of the company, or leaving those tax dollars there and just wishing real hard that nothing bad happens. Would he indicate what other options are available, please?
Mr. Speaker, the remedies suggested by the New Democratic Party, of course, would not be ones which this government would follow. We would do more than wish. We'll take whatever action is required. I don't have to recite the sections of the Trust Companies Act as to what the remedies and possibilities are, and I think the response that the Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs has properly outlined the position of the government with respect to the filing requirements.
Well, one final supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. Then perhaps the provincial treasurer would identify what concrete steps he's taken to protect against the loss of this huge amount of money.
Well, once again, Mr. Speaker, the member is leading us into the area of speculation. I'll simply say that we will take all steps necessary, and the legislation is clear as to what our responsibility is, and we'll abide by that legislation.
Second's main question.
Right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to direct this inquiry to the minister responsible for the Women's Secretariat. As member likely is aware, statements made yesterday by at least two members of the government side startled and amazed women of this province, and I guess apparently there's still some debate about whether or not women should work for pay. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the minister would state on behalf of this government his policy regarding public support for initiatives such as child care and family violence shelters, which give women at least a chance at equality.
Mr. Speaker, such a large question could lead to an hour-long answer, but to be brief with respect to it, this government firmly supports the concept of assisting women and men in terms of daycare in the country. We are, in fact, the greatest provider of daycare spaces in Canada and have the greatest accessibility to those kinds of programs. We believe firmly in supporting the concept of women's shelters where women have been hurt or harmed by spouses. We support, by and large, I maybe should make that more emphatic, Mr. Speaker, we support totally the concept of equal pay in terms of individuals, be they men or women. We support equality and have that enshrined in our legislation.
Mr. Speaker, might I just add briefly that I look forward to the hour-long discussion in which I can also hear reference to drug addiction. Has the minister asked the Women's Secretariat or the chair of his mysterious advisory council to develop any sort of policy education program on the need for these services?
Mr. Speaker, I'd have to have a definition of policy, I can't recall the term the honourable member used, policy, advisory, direction.
Well, I'm reluctant to abandon a supplementary question on this matter. Is it a matter of clarification, Mr. Speaker? A policy or education program? Mr. Speaker, the honourable member from Grand Prairie during debate yesterday asked why this province needs women's shelters. Given that some estimates indicate that over 55,000 women are battered in Alberta, I wonder if the minister has any plans for a seminar for members of this assembly on the crisis of violence against women.
Mr. Speaker, I haven't considered a seminar for honourable members, though if the members opposite feel that's necessary, I can certainly give them any literature they might require on the topic. I do take the situation with respect to battering of women seriously. I hope to be tabling in the not-too-distant future the paper which the Government of Alberta presented to the status of women ministers in British Columbia, who met a couple of weeks ago, which in fact entails and details right across many departments of our government what we're doing to try and deal with that very definite problem. Perhaps that information will suffice in terms of the information the honourable member is requesting.
Handy for a start, Mr. Speaker. One final supplementary.
Supplementaries, I'm afraid.
That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Main question, Leader of the Liberal Party.
It's a supplemental, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Social Services. In view of some of the messages we got yesterday from Calgary McKnight and other members of the new Free-Speaking Caucus, could she tell or could she give some could she give any outline as to what the government's plans are, if there are plans to cut back on daycare services, as was suggested by the honourable member for Calgary McKnight?
Point of personal privilege, Mr. Speaker. I did not suggest that, as the honourable member suggested, and I would ask him to withdraw that remark.
Would you please resume your seat? Thank you, honourable member. The matters, as mentioned 2 days ago, matters of order and matters of privilege are going to be raised at the end of question period, not at this time. That was a matter of personal privilege and can indeed be raised again at the end of question period. The member for Westlock Sturgeon is about to give us, I think, his supplementary on the issue that was raised by the acting leader of the New Democratic Party. So if we could have a brief supplementary, please, before we go on to the next question.
I think the supplementary, Mr. Speaker, was not that I know the honourable member has no say. It was with respect to whether or not the government is going to cut back on its commitment to daycare in view of what some of the opinions expressed by the Minister for Calgary McKnight.
Mr. Speaker, if the honourable leader has read the budget documents, the honourable leader will be fully aware that we have a steadfast commitment to services for children in this province, and in fact, they have been enhanced.
Main question, please, Leader of the Liberal Party.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Agriculture, the admirable changes pace here. In view of the announcements and reports that the farmers are having trouble finding space in the grain elevators to deliver this year's crop. As you know, the wheat board has designated June the 28th as the final deadline. Is the minister considered setting up a hotline or some method of informing those farmers where the elevators are plugged, that there is room elsewhere, where the room is in the province?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in regard to the honourable member for Westlock Sturgeon, I'm sure the honourable member is aware that this does fall under the minister responsible for the wheat board at the federal level, Mr. Charlie Mayer. But I'm more than happy to communicate with Mr. Mayer, indicating the concern that have also been expressed to myself as it relates to the movement of grain prior to the end of their quota allotment.
Supplemental, Mr. Speaker. I'm aware that your federal cousin calls the tune, but I had hoped that you'd have very good communication with him. I thought that you might be able to tell the farmers just where these agents would be.
We've had discussion previously about using you and so forth in terms of the debate. Could we, in the question period, please direct it to the minister? The minister, please. Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker, to the minister, then could we look at the line, is the minister prepared to help the farmers who cover the extra costs of shipping their grain to these farther points, or trucking the grains to the point to be picked up?
Mr. Speaker, maybe I could indicate at the outset that I would recommend more individuals from the constituency of Westlock Sturgeon attend the chamber, because I notice the honourable member's behaviour is much more measured and guided when he does have actual constituents here to see how he conducts himself. But let me indicate to him that this government is always prepared to do what they can to help our agricultural sector, and if that is a representation that the honourable member is making, we take all representations very seriously.
Mr. Speaker, to the minister, I'm glad for his lessons in public behavior. At least somebody does come out to watch me, which is more than he can say. The next supplemental to the hidden Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Speaker, is in view of the fact that many of the times as you wait at railroad crossings in this province, you see hopper cars going by with produced or courtesy, whatever it is, Mr. Speaker, the Heritage Trust Fund. Just where in the dickens, Mr. Speaker, could the minister tell us where these hopper cars are now when we need them in Ontario?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not aware where the hopper cars are, but I'm more than happy to look into it for the honourable member from Westlock Sturgeon.
One more further supplementary, member Westlock Sturgeon.
Last supplemental is with respect to the hopper cars again. I know that after 2 poor years of, Mr. Speaker, after 2 poor years of grasshoppers and poor crops, the minister may have designated the hopper cars off to Ontario or Quebec, but could he have, does he have any idea where they are now in this province?
Mr. Speaker, we're more than happy to inquire where they are, but I want to leave the honourable member the assurance that these hopper cars are used in a very productive way on behalf of the grain growers of this province. I should also share with him that this government has been very active in a number of programs that relate directly to agriculture to offset the input costs, because we recognize, unlike him and his counterparts, we recognize the difficulties that the agricultural sector are facing.
Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, a supplementary question with regards to representation to the Canadian Wheat Board or the Minister, Mr. Mayor. Could the Minister indicate whether any representation has been made on behalf of Alberta farmers for an increase in the initial price of grain in the new crop year 86-87?
Mr. Speaker, we are in communication on a regular basis and do discuss areas of concern to all of the agricultural sector. And again, if the honourable member wishes to make that as a representation, we're more than happy to take it as such.
Member for Vegreville.
To the Honourable Minister of Agriculture, would the minister be prepared to consider making representations to his federal counterpart, the minister responsible for the Canadian Wheat Board, that quota extensions be granted for the delivery points that are plugged and where producers are worried about getting their 85, 86 grain delivered before the deadline?
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker. Member for Cypress Redcliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Agriculture, would the Minister of Agriculture enlist the support of the vast majority of the people of Alberta in seeing that those cars are moving by having people phone his office when they think a car is sat on a siding too long, or it's off on a siding, or sat by an elevator too long, or is found in a place where there is no grade, phone in his office so he could ask the CPR or the CNR why the cars aren't moving?
I'd be more than happy to, Mr. Speaker, but I should indicate too, and I know that the honourable member who just put the question to me does this on a regular basis, and the only reason I underscore it is because I know he does it and I'm not so sure about members in the other parties. But as it does fall under federal jurisdiction, if you're not contacting your federal member of parliament, you're negating your responsibilities.
Leader of the Representative. Main question, Leader of the Representative Party, followed by the member for Banff-Cochrane.
Mr. Speaker, my question is very appropriate comments that have been made. My question is to the Minister of Agriculture as well, and it's a follow-up to yesterday's question, where I indicated to the Minister that on June the 16th, the Associate Minister indicated that the Farm Credit Stability Program was an addition to the ADC lending program. Yesterday, the Minister indicated that there would be no stacking of programs and that existing AADC loan amounts would be subtracted from the $200,000 loan limit. Mr. Speaker, to me there's a clear contradiction between those two statements, and I've examined throne speeches, budget speeches, and it's very unclear. My question to the Minister: why was the limitation not announced during the election, and could the Minister clarify whether this is a policy change since he has become Minister of the Department?
Mr. Speaker, the only contradiction I see is in the member's own mind. If he would be kind enough to indicate to me in written form as to where he sees this contradiction, I'd be more than happy to respond, but it appears to me as if he's fabricating something that is not actual fact, as that has been the position of this party, and I am consistent in bringing it forward as was advocated during the election campaign. And as I indicated to him yesterday, the reason being is we want to make sure that this availability is spread out to as great as possible extent that we can to the farming population. And in the event that we allow stacking, we are limiting it to the amount of farmers that can participate.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the Minister. It may not be a contradiction in his mind, but one Minister says that this new program is a supplement to the AADC program. And what the Minister says, it's not. So that, Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister is very clear. Is it a supplement to the present programs, and there will be clearly $2 billion available in new monies to the farmers of Alberta, or are the current programs subtracted from the $2 billion of programs before it is effectively put before the farmers of Alberta?
Again, Mr. Speaker, it's obvious the honourable member has a misunderstanding. It is a supplement, but we're not going to allow stacking. We're going to have an additional $2 billion available to the farming population, in addition to the excess of $1 billion under ADC, and in addition to the other worthwhile programs that we do have under our Department of Agriculture right now. It is a supplement, but we're not allowing stacking.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate that clarification, and so will the farmers of Alberta, because many of them misunderstand that across this province. Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the Minister of Agriculture with regards to other programs that may be involved in this no stacking concept. Could the Minister indicate whether Treasury branch farm loans or farm development loans that are guaranteed are as well considered items that cannot be stacked?
Mr. Speaker, I look forward to the speedy introduction of this legislation, and when the legislation is before the House of Commons, I would hope that members in the opposition party would give it speedy passage so that we can have it available to the farming population as quickly as possible. And at that time, I look forward to getting into the details of it with the honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary.
3 supplementaries. Yes, indeed. Member for Vegreville? Okay, I'm sorry, I've been corrected. That you're member for Little Bow. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, that's to be the 4th time that I've only had 2 supplementaries, and being very tolerant with the new Speaker, I haven't said anything prior to this. Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the Minister. Yes, we want this speedy movement on with regards to this program. When will the guidelines be presented to this legislature so we can discuss it? When will the confusion over this program be eliminated in this province, which prevails today?
Speaker, may I say at the outset, as my colleague pointed out to me, I referred to this August chamber as a House of Commons. I'm sorry I haven't quite adjusted yet to the opportunity of serving in this House. But let me share with the honourable member that we are going to proceed with it very, very quickly. And I should assure him that the correspondence and the telephone calls that we have had to date, the individual farmers contacting me, do not have the confusion that the honourable member does have.
Member for Vegreville.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Honourable Minister of Agriculture. Could the Minister indicate to us just how the $200,000 limit was arrived at?
The figures that were put together within the Department of Agriculture indicated that the average farm debt in Alberta was in the vicinity of $180,000.
Supplementary, member for Westlack Sturgeon.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister. Is the Minister in his new guidelines for the loans that are coming out prepared to do away with the anti-spouse discrimination that now exists in the Alberta Agricultural Development Corporation, whereby a man with his brother can get $200,000 each, but a man and his wife is limited to $200,000. Is the Minister prepared to recognize that wives are often partners in a farming thing and should qualify for $200,000 also?
Mr. Speaker, this government does recognize in a very strong way that women do play a very dominant role in our agricultural sector, and that is exactly why our Premier saw fit to appoint an associate ministry to this very important sector to recognize the important role that women do play. And again, as I mentioned to the honourable member earlier, if he is sincere in his representations, I would hope he would put them in writing so that we can give proper consideration to some suggestions, and I stress the word some suggestions from him that are worthwhile.
Member for Banff Cochrane, followed by the member for Edmonton Glengarry.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Forestry. Mr. Speaker, there is a controversy surrounding the hunting of the grizzly bear in Banff Cochrane, in Kananaskis country, and in southwest Alberta. My question to the Minister is, why was this grizzly bear hunt undertaken?
Mr. Speaker, my department's responsibility is to maintain wildlife populations, but at the same time to ensure the public safety from that wildlife. And in K Country, quite a number of considerations were given before this was undertaken. Bear populations have increased. Public interaction between the bear and hunters and recreationists have increased. Bear complaints have increased. Last year, we disposed of 2 problem grizzlies in that area, and our wildlife biologists and our professionals recommended that we proceed with the hunt. It's worthy to note that the same recreationalists or professional staff were the ones that recommended several years ago to close it down.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister has indicated that studies and officials have been involved. As the grizzly bear is an endangered species, what is the Minister's estimate of the number of bears that will be killed or harvested in this year's hunt?
Mr. Speaker, the first part of that question, no, the grizzly is not an endangered species in Alberta, and as far as the second portion of that question, we intend to issue about 25 permits. We anticipate about 2 to 3 bears being killed, about an equal number to what we had to dispose of by staff last year.
Mr. Speaker, final supplementary, if I may, then. Has there been any public input or advice provided or sought by the minister in coming to this decision?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. The fish and wildlife regulations are run through local committees that with our staff at the first step each year. Then our Fish and Wildlife Advisory Council, which is a provincial organization of some 25 organizations, go through those regulations prior to recommending to the minister what changes should be made. On that 25-member board, there are quite a number of outfits: Unifarm, Fish and Game, AWA, you go on and on. The provincial organizations sit 6 times a year and give me recommendations on that, on any changes in wildlife regulations.
Supplementary, the member for Calgary Mountain View.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a supplementary to the minister, he indicated that the grizzly bear was not an endangered species. I'm wondering whether that's on the basis of its populations only in Alberta or in North America, and if it's only within Alberta and not North America, do we have any wider responsibility for a North American species that might have a significant population solely within the borders of Alberta?
Mr. Speaker, in some states and elsewhere in the world, the grizzly bear has been put on an endangered species list. In Alberta, our estimates are that we have between 500 and 1,000, according to the Fish and Wildlife Status Report that came out a year ago. And the grizzly bear, although we have been having hunts, has to be managed well, and it takes an exceptional hunter to track one down. As I mentioned, I think the key is where we do have problem bears, we should be using a recreational opportunity to harvest them rather than having our staff dispose of them.
I'm sorry, Honourable Member, the question was raised by a government member, therefore there are no supplementaries for other government members on this issue. What? That's correct. The member for Edmonton Glengarry, followed by the member for Edmonton Meadowlark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll try to have much shorter preambles than the Honourable Liberal Leader has to this point. Question for the Minister of Environment: is the Minister planning to proceed with the proposed agreement that will see Bow Valley Resource Services Chem Securities Limited build and manage the Swan Hills Waste Disposal Plant?
Mr. Speaker, a matter of memorandum of understanding was signed between the Special Waste Management Corporation and Bow Valley Resources earlier this year, and I have a series of drafts that I'm looking at that I'll be reviewing as the months go on.
Supplementary. Does this indicate that the department then has decided to accept an escalation of costs to taxpayers from $25 million to $46 million as outlined in the Special Waste Management Corporation letter of December 3rd, 1985?
Mr. Speaker, as with all matters dealing with construction in the province of Alberta, and in recognition of the very, very high and safety standards that we're demanding of the Alberta Special Waste Management Corporation, I'm not troubled by a difference in dollar figures because the honourable member hasn't yet identified what is causing the difference.
I suspect it's not increased wages. Supplementary. In view of Bow Valley Resource Services' unwillingness to accept any downside risk, has the Minister reviewed the joint venture proposals that were originally brought forward by Stablex Canada Limited, Trisol Corporation, or the combination of Genstar Conservation Limited and IT Corp, to see if any of them offer a better deal than Bow Valley Resource Services is offering?
Mr. Speaker, I'm pretty satisfied that the memorandum of understanding that was signed earlier in 1986 is a very, very important one and a good one for the people of Alberta.
Supplementary.
The member for Littlebow.
Thank you. Supplementary. Has the Minister then decided to ignore the Woods-Gordon analysis that the plant is not viable in the private sector and should therefore be operated in the public sector as a public service.
Mr. Speaker, financing for the Special Waste Management Bow Valley Resources and joint venture plant in Swan Hills will be funded on the basis of 60% by Bow Valley Resources and 40% by the Special Waste Management Corporation. And with the funding proposal, the Special Waste Management Corporation will have 50% of the number of seats on the Board of Directors, and Bow Valley will have an equal number. I think that we're very, very well protected.
Member for Little Bow.
Speaker, supplementary question to the Minister. Could the Minister indicate whether the final decision with regards to the agreement with Bow Valley Resources was a decision of the Alberta Special Waste Management Committee, who could have made the decision, or was it a ministerial decision and a political decision?
Well, Mr. Speaker, under the legislation that the Special Waste Management Corporation operates under, it is a Crown corporation. But in recognizing the importance that the people of Alberta, through the government of Alberta, recognize with respect to the plant, consultations have been ongoing with the Minister of the Environment in this matter.
Member for Edmonton Meadowlark, I'm sorry you've had your supplementary. I'm sorry. The honourable member knows Beauchesne as well as most people in the House. Minister doesn't necessarily have to give you the answer if you weren't satisfied. The chair recognizes the member for Edmonton Meadowlark, followed by the member for Edmonton Mill Woods.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. This is not a supplemental. I would like to go with my full set of questions. Thank you. I would like it to be clear to the House, Mr. Speaker, the terms of the contract with BVRS and CSL. Could the Minister please indicate why BVRS will receive a guaranteed return on their deemed equity investment, deemed, of 13% after taxes and 25% before taxes, which they don't pay this year because they're losing money, without taking any risk and after covering all carrying costs and after covering all operating expenses?
Minister, before you reply, could I ask the indulgence of the House that rather than give us all these esoteric alphabetical soup combinations in the questions, could you give us the full listing of what the companies really are? It would be very helpful for other members in the House who don't have the same knowledge as you do. Honourable member, Minister, please.
Mr. Speaker, I'd be very, very happy to go through the whole memorandum of understanding that has been signed. It was signed several months ago between the Special Waste Management Corporation and Bow Valley Resources Industry. But I would suspect that you, sir, would rule me out of order with respect to the length of the response that I would give. I'd be very, very delighted to have this whole matter discussed when the estimates of Alberta Environment are before the House in a matter of days.
Could you please table the memorandum, Mr. Minister? This is a point of order. I'd rather not waste a question. Okay.
Make the request that it's on the order paper.
Thank you. The Alberta Special Waste Management Corporation was established to protect the interests of Albertans from an objective point of view. Could the Minister please indicate why he did not accept the Alberta Special Waste Management Corporation's recommendation late last year to reject the Bow Valley Resource Services Chem Security Limited offer and to pursue tenders from other companies stronger financially? Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I've only been the Minister of the Environment since the 26th day of May.
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker, I understood that we couldn't direct questions of this nature to previous speakers. Could the Minister please assume responsibility for that question?
Difficulty that's occurring, honourable member, for Edmonton Meadowlark is that the detail involved really does make it a matter for the order paper. It also has certain elements which, brings it more in line with the questioning that would take place in estimates where there's much more opportunity for ebb and flow and to go into much more detail. So I think that's part of what's here. So perhaps you might take it under advisement that you might put it onto the order paper. That would be appreciated by the Assembly.
A supplementary, please. Could the Minister ensure that the hazardous wastes that have in the past been imported to this province by firms such as Kinetic will no longer be imported and transported through our communities to the special waste, or the Swan Hills Waste Management plant when it's completed?
Mr. Speaker, the government has had a moratorium on such waste since the spring of 1984.
Supplementary. The Honourable Minister. Could the Honourable Minister indicate whether final approval for Bow Valley Resources in carrying out the responsibilities with the Alberta Special Waste Management Corporation was given by the Minister, and in that giving of that final approval, did the Minister review the financial report, current report, and conditions of Bow Valley Resources before finalizing the agreement?
Mr. Speaker, this minister has given no final approval.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct my question to the minister. Will the minister guarantee this assembly that all the construction people on that work site will have Alberta trades qualifications?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the responsibility for the construction of the plant site will be held by the joint venture corporation. That plant site will be located essentially within the constituency that I represent, and the honourable member should be very much aware that I will be very concerned about who's employed at the site, and I will be requesting that preference be given to constituents of mine.
Member for Edmonton Mill Woods, followed by the member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Technology, Research and Telecommunications regarding the closures of the Access Network 3 regional offices in Lethbridge, Red Deer and Grand Prairie. Can the Minister confirm for the Assembly that, in fact, the real reason for the closure of these offices is that the Access senior management, none of whom are professional educators, have in fact diverted the funds from basic service to students and educators into the satellite service?
Indeed, Mr. Speaker, I cannot do that. I would point out that we're on a question apparently of whether Access continues to provide information in various forms to the school system. Mr. Speaker, I have read the newspapers today as well, and I have a rather extensive response here, but I'll leave it to this limit that there are, in the last 2 months, approximately 141 titles of tapes, video, and audio which have been purchased solely for the kindergarten to grade 12 purposes, and also that of the total component in the library of that kind of material or resource, almost 3,800 of 4,100 are strictly for the purposes and geared to the public school system.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. Did the government not, in fact, get a commitment from Access Network at the time it was considering the satellite service that Access Network would have to fund and support the satellite service without jeopardizing or taking away the funding from basic service to education?
Mr. Speaker, there seems to be a misunderstanding about the satellite service. And in fact, the satellite service is simply a recognition of the increasing technology and the capability of the satellite form of distribution of information, and it is using that more efficient and more effective process.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. In light of the fact of the recent closures, which are part of a string of earlier closures as well, and in light of the fact that all but one of the educators in senior positions in Access Management have left Access in disgust of how this process has taken place, can the Minister offer to commit himself to establishing a committee of educators in this province to review the mandate of Access Network and to try and reestablish the credibility which it has now lost with the educators of this province?
Mr. Speaker, we've just heard a representation of opinion, and I would be quite prepared to give my opinion on the matter, and it's in absolute total disagreement with the opinion of the honourable member. I've already pointed out last day in question period that in fact there is an advisory committee of educators who review the courses of study in the public school system and who develop a prioritized list of materials which they would like to see developed. And that is the major consideration of the board in selecting what items will be either manufactured, purchased, or reproduced via print or by dubbing.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker, final supplementary. If in fact the government is going to insist on making these cutbacks and closures of the regional offices to support the distribution and utilization of the products that the minister just referred to, in fact, what's the point of having things that are on the shelf that nobody knows how to use, where to use? Can the minister now tell us that if he's going to insist on that, what severance settlements and assistance in finding alternative employments is Access going to make available to the affected employees?
Mr. Speaker, with respect to the affected employees, notice was given in May that terminations would occur at the end of August, so there was lots of advance notice given, and in every situation of full-time employees, assistance was offered to relocate or to assist with alternative location of alternative employment. Mr. Speaker, it is my view that these employees have been exceptionally well treated. With respect to the premise of the question, preface of the question, which had to do with a diminution of service, again, Mr. Speaker, I repeat what I said last day under questioning, and that is that this action is taken because of changes which have occurred in the resource materials available to teachers through school boards, and as a consequence of a survey of educators which showed that approximately 3/4 of them found that the service which had been valuable originally because of a different configuration of resources available within school boards was no longer meeting a need in the opinion of teachers.
That's not an answer, that's a filibuster.
Member for Ponoka-Rimbey.
Mr. Speaker, given that the delivery of educational and public service programs through the satellite network is certainly the way this type of communication is going, I wonder if the minister could advise the House as to whether or not there are any programs being planned or already in place to provide additional satellite service to the schools of the province in order that this type of communication will be available to them and to the students of the province.
Mr. Speaker, the question posed by the honourable member for Ponoka can be answered in two respects. One is that the Access Network does provide, assisted by the Department of Technology, Research and Telecommunications, assistance in funding of dishes so that schools which were formerly in a location that could not make use of the broadcasts are now able to do so. That is one component of the answer, and the other is that we do have a continuing list of priorities of materials that educators wish to have produced, and in fact I know the board at its next meeting will be making decisions on some of that list.
Member for Forest Lawn.
Mr. Speaker, I have here a submission by Pan-Canadian Petroleum to the Standing Senate Committee on Energy. My question is to the Minister of Energy. What action has the minister taken on behalf of Alberta producers to deal with the problem outlined in this report, which is that Canadian refineries are paying between $1 and $5 less for Canadian crude than the West Texas Intermediate benchmark, which was the standard for the oil industry?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have met with representatives from the industry in Calgary, including the author of that particular report, and There's some differences of opinion as to the degree of this perceived problem of where the refineries were paying lower than what possibly should for the crude. There are some indications that during the rapid fall in the price of crude, that the posted refinery price in Canada was $1 to $3 below the benchmark of the Chicago West Texas Intermediate. However, there is also evidence given from other sources that indicate that that may not possibly be the case, taking into account delivery times. It's my intention to review the matter further. In fact, I've asked the Petroleum Marketing Commission to examine the situation and to see if they could provide me with some recommendations if, in fact, that is the case.
Mr. Speaker, there's an assertion in this report that the deregulated market is not working. In your upcoming question to the minister, in his upcoming meeting with the federal counterpart, will the minister be going to bat for a fair price for, from the refineries for Canadian producers?
As the honourable member knows, Mr. Speaker, we have an agreement with the Western Accord that we are very happy with in terms of having crude oil reflect the market price. This particular concern has been raised, as I indicated, and it's a matter of assessing the degree to which it had been a problem. When the price leveled off or came back up somewhat during the month of May, in fact, the opposite occurred, where the posted refinery price in Canada was above the spot market price in the United States. So it's a matter of assessing, first of all, whether indeed there is a problem. It is my intention, when meeting with the minister on Friday or Saturday, I believe it's Saturday, to discuss in general the state of the energy industry in this country.
Further
Time for question period has expired. Is the Assembly willing to allow the member for Calgary Forest Lawn one final supplementary?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the federal Minister of Energy today informed the Commons that she has never been asked to renegotiate the Western Accord. In light of the desperate situation of the oil industry today, does the Minister of Energy intend to stand up for Albertans by opening the Accord in his discussions this weekend?
Mr. Speaker, in terms of who's standing up for Albertans, I would jar the honourable member's memory back a couple of years as to who was fighting for the elimination of the National Energy Program.
Good. Is the Assembly willing to allow two ministers the opportunity to reply, rather to give supplementary information to questions raised in earlier question periods as well as today? Excuse me, Honourable Minister, I think it's only correct at this stage that I respond to a point of order which was raised yesterday by the member for Clover Bar with respect to the practice of ministers giving additional information at the end of question period, and also perhaps the length of the answers supplied, and then the lack of opportunity to respond. And having considered the matter over the course of the last 24 hours, concerning the purported point of order raised by the honourable member for Clover Bar yesterday, the Chair has had an opportunity to consider the matter raised by the honourable member and rules that the matter constitutes a complaint rather than a point of order. The Chair notes that the consent of the House has been given to permit honourable ministers to respond at the conclusion of oral question period to questions previously taken as notice and to supplement responses given previously. The Chair also notes that this practice is consistent with previously established practice in this House of long standing. Finally, the Chair undertakes to take up the honourable member's concern with House leaders at the next available opportunity. Thank you. Minister of Economic Development and Trade.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to supplement an answer provided by my colleague, the Minister of Agriculture, to a question placed by the member for Westlock Sturgeon with respect to Alberta hopper cars, the 1,000 hopper cars that were provided for Alberta farmers. The cars are put into service through an operating agreement with the two railways, CN and CP. And they're allocated under rules that are set up by the Canadian Wheat Board and through the Grain Transportation Agency in terms of the allocation of the cars. Now, the cars aren't permitted to move into eastern Canada. They are under agreement, they serve the Western Canadian Grain Basin, that is Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. They're also not permitted to move into the United States for service. And we have a monitoring system that is in place where we can access information as to the location of all these cars through an agreement with the railways.
Minister of Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the honourable member for Westlock Sturgeon asked me to confirm that 4 of 6 investigators at the Fort Road District Office of Alberta Social Services had resigned because of high caseloads and that the office caseload had risen to approximately 400 or 66 per worker. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to inform the legislature that the honourable member's information is inaccurate. 4 members of the Child Abuse Investigation Unit have indeed recently moved on, and specifically, 1 was promoted internally, 1 took a promotion to the City of Edmonton Social Services, 1 left for British Columbia because her family was located there, and 1 is now working part-time in private practice and part-time for the department. As to the caseloads, Mr. Speaker, April was the month with the highest child abuse caseload at Fort Road District Office. There were 95 cases amongst 6 workers, nowhere near the 400. If I might help the honourable member with mathematics, that works out to an average of 16 cases per worker, not the 66 that he alleged. And Mr. Speaker, as a result of inquiring about the honourable member's question, I would like to pass along that the workers at the Fort Road District Office have expressed concerns that the honourable member thinks that they are not capable of handling the work. And I had expressed my views about the work of these very excellent professionals in my remarks last June 18th. And I would hope the honourable member would do likewise.
I'm sorry, that's not. What is the point of privilege?
Privilege, the question that she answered was not the question that I asked. She's talking about caseload. Yeah.
We're not debating this. The minister has supplemented information. We've had this ruling as offered earlier, and if you would like to deal with this issue further, if the speakers, could I have the attention of the 2 members, please? Excuse me. Excuse me. The Chair is willing to meet with the Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party and the Honourable Leader of the Representatives after we get a bit further on in the course of the afternoon, so that you can raise your concerns on a face-to-face basis. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture would like to supplement some information on a point of order, I believe, for privilege.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member from Little Bow, who is a long-standing member of this chamber, who is well respected, was somewhat confused in the premise in which he put the question to me, because I'd like to refer to Hansard on page 30 of June the 16th, and when he indicated the Associate Minister and myself were contradicting each other, Clearly, there is no contradiction because she indicated at that time to his question, and I shall put it on the record so that the record is straight and so that the honourable member is aware of it, that the, and I quote, the $2 billion under the Farm Credit Stability Program is in addition to the $1 billion already in long-term credit through ADC. Mr. Speaker, I also have another point of order, if I might, sir, as it relates to a correction in Hansard.
Quickly, please.
Mr. Speaker, in my endeavour to always have full disclosure to the Chamber and to honourable members, I erred, and it came to my attention when I read Hansard of Friday, I erred in some percentage figures that I related to the House, and on reviewing them on page, rather than go into my lengthy remarks, on reviewing them of June the 20th on page 151, I indicated that I should point out to him that only 3.8% is paid out to other provinces under this program, when in reality that figure is 8.2%, and we're delighted that this program is so worthwhile for our agricultural sector.
The Chair would like to comment to the Minister of Agriculture and thank him for correcting the record, but I would respectfully remind all members of the Assembly that if there are corrections to be made to Blues or correction to Hansard, that there is provision made for that to happen at an earlier opportunity. But again, with the newness of the House, perhaps we could all take that under advisement. Earlier this afternoon, we had an exchange of comments between the member for West Loch Sturgeon and the member for Calgary McKnight. And in that regard, we have some directions to the Assembly under standing orders. Matters of privilege, which is 15 subsection 5. A member may always raise a question of privilege in the Assembly immediately after the words are uttered or the events occur that give rise to the question. Listening to or reading that, one then could concur to what transpired where the member for Calgary McKnight then rose in his place. However, I would also, for the second time in a number of days, refer members to Beauchesne, citation 370. Excuse me, that's 371. We flipped over a page here. We'll find that one in just half a moment. 317. This is almost as difficult as trying to find your way through a hymn book.
You'll think the Bible's easy after this.
And it's in that citation, again, in those areas where we have it to occur at the end of question period. It's 366.
We shall overcome.
Together we shall indeed overcome. Your pardon? I make no apology to the House for the number of notes that have transpired in the course of the last half hour and the number of citations which have been sent to me. This is indeed it. A question of privilege or point of order raised during the oral question period ought to be taken up after the oral question period unless the Speaker considers it to be an extremely grave matter. With respect to what transpired, the comments as raised and the blues have been sent for and various members have perused them. I would regard that this is really a matter of a dispute between two members as to what one of them said. So that in turn falls within the provision in Beauchesne, a citation of 19.1. And the Hansard records really do record what did indeed transpire. And I trust that both honourable members will read the record together and then be able to see what indeed was spoken so that we don't get engaged in these matters of opinion being voiced. Orders of the day.
Government motions